Today, we will trace the timeline to see how this formidable ancient power rose through endless warfare and was eventually consumed by the hatred it had cultivated for centuries. From 900 BC to 745 BC, Assyria laid the foundation of its rise through comprehensive military reforms and established the world's first full-time professional standing army in ancient history. Supported by coordinated tactics combining archers, chariot corps, and specialized siege troops, Assyrian armed forces gained overwhelming combat superiority over contemporary civilizations and transformed from a marginal tribal state into a dominant regional power. In the early developmental stage, Assyria existed only as a small city-state in northern Mesopotamia, repeatedly subjected to the rule of powerful neighboring kingdoms, including Babylonia and Mitanni. Confined by barren land and harsh natural conditions, the kingdom could hardly achieve economic growth via farming or cross-regional commerce, leaving large-scale military expansion as its sole path toward development. Starting from the 9th century BC, successive Assyrian monarchs enacted sweeping military reforms to abandon the traditional militia system, where peasants took up arms only during wartime and returned to agricultural work afterwards. Instead, they founded a standardized permanent military establishment. Prior to this institutional innovation, all ancient civilizations relied on irregular conscripted troops with inconsistent training, uneven equipment, and fragmented tactical planning. Assyrian professional soldiers were exempt from farming obligations and dedicated their entire lives to military service. Under unified recruitment standards, consistent equipment allocation, and strict reward and punishment regulations, marking a revolutionary milestone in ancient military development. The Assyrian High Command divided troops into specialized branches, tailored for varied combat scenarios, consisting of heavy infantry, light archers, chariot units, cavalry, and dedicated siege engineering corps, with each division tasked with distinct responsibilities to form an integrated offensive and defensive combat system. In terms of equipment standardization, Assyrian heavy infantry were equipped with metal helmets, scale armor, shields, bronze spears, and short swords to secure superior close quarter combat and defensive capabilities against rival soldiers. Archers were furnished with powerful composite bows, capable of long-distance penetration to suppress enemy formations from afar. Modified heavy chariots served as core assault units, each manned by a driver and a combat warrior to charge enemy lines, split troop formations, and pursue retreating foes. Most pioneering of all were the specialized siege engineers, who invented innovative siege machinery, including massive assault towers, collapsible scaling ladders, and heavy battering rams alongside underground tunneling tools. In the ancient world, tall city walls represented the most effective defensive barrier, forcing most invading armies to resort to prolonged blockades when attacking fortified settlements. Assyrian siege technology broke this inherent limitation, enabling troops to scale city walls via assault towers, crack gate and wall structures with battering rams, and undermine defensive foundations through underground excavation to capture cities efficiently. The combination of multi-branch coordination, long-range suppression, and all-round siege capability granted Assyrian troops unmatched battlefield prowess. Professional training guaranteed disciplined execution, while uniform armament stabilized overall combat effectiveness, and systematic tactical coordination secured consistent dominance on the battlefield. Relying on such mature military infrastructure, Assyria gradually defeated surrounding rival tribes and annexed small neighboring polities, breaking geographical confinement and evolving from a weak frontier settlement into a dominant northern power with sufficient strength to compete for supremacy across the whole Middle East. From 745 BC to 627 BC, under the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III, Assyria entered its golden age of territorial expansion. Syria, and large swathes of Egyptian territory to build a multi-continental empire spanning West Asia and North Africa. Meanwhile, the Assyrian ruling class formulated a distinctive reigning strategy built upon calculated intimidation and deliberate displays of cruelty, as core psychological warfare to secure control over its vast multi-ethnic domains. Upon ascending the throne in 745 BC, Tiglath-Pileser III rolled out comprehensive internal reforms to consolidate central authority, curtail local aristocratic power, and optimize military logistics before launching continuous cross-border conquests aimed at unifying the entire ancient, Near Eastern civilized sphere. During his reign, Assyrian legions overthrew Syrian city-states and the Kingdom of Israel, subjugated Phoenician settlements, and seized full control of the eastern Mediterranean coastline to secure vital trade routes. The army then advanced south into Mesopotamia to defeat Old Babylonian forces and incorporate the fertile core lands of Babylonia into imperial territory, before pushing onward into Egypt, routing pharaonic armies, and occupying northern Egyptian heartlands. Decades of successive campaigns expanded Assyrian territory to its historical peak, covering core agricultural zones of Mesopotamia, coastal Levant, southern Anatolia, and northern Egypt, incorporating agrarian kingdoms, maritime trading communities, and desert nomadic tribes under a single imperial system. Instead of adopting inclusive local governance or cultural assimilation policies, Assyria implemented a regime founded on calculated terror. Cruelty was never random barbarism, but a premeditated governing tactic designed to crush potential resistance. Following the capture of any city or tribal territory, Assyrian troops punished rebels and captive opponents publicly, documenting wartime atrocities on stone reliefs and official inscriptions across imperial lands to perpetuate the memory of resistance's terrible consequences for subjected populations. By planting perpetual fear among conquered peoples, Assyrian rulers cut down large-scale uprisings and maintained long-term territorial stability, despite enormous administrative costs stemming from ethnically diverse domains. From 668 BC to 627 BC, under Ashurbanipal's rule, Assyria reached its peak in cultural achievement, alongside accumulating systemic flaws born from endless territorial expansion. Ashurbanipal constructed the renowned Royal Library of Nineveh to preserve countless ancient clay tablet manuscripts. Yet the empire's exclusive focus on military conquest eroded domestic social frameworks and laid the groundwork for its impending collapse. Ashurbanipal stood as the last powerful sovereign of unified Assyria. In the early years of his reign, inherited military superiority, secured complete regional submission across the Near East. Unlike preceding monarchs who prioritized constant warfare, Ashurbanipal devoted considerable resources to cultural preservation by assembling the most comprehensive ancient library of the pre-classical world inside Nineveh's royal compound. Imperial scribes collected clay tablet archives originating from Sumer, Babylonia, Egypt, Phoenicia, and all surrounding civilizations, compiling astronomical records, legal codes, epic poems, medical texts, and commercial documents to form an irreplaceable archival resource for modern archaeological research, even as cultural prosperity flourished. Relentless expansion drained Assyria's domestic reserves. Every fiscal resource, human resource, and institutional development within the empire prioritized military expenditure and territorial annexation, leaving no funding for civilian livelihood improvement, diversified industrial development, or social welfare initiatives. Imperial wealth accumulated from conquered territories was funneled toward the royal court and standing army, while indigenous populations and subjugated communities endured excessive taxation, endless forced labor, and systematic exploitation. No social contract bound different classes together, resulting in widespread resentment among native Assyrian commoners, alongside deep-seated hatred across all annexed regions. The sprawling empire appeared formidable on the surface, yet suffered from mounting internal conflicts, waiting to erupt at the first sign of weakened central authority. The period spanning 627 BC to 612 BC marked the catastrophic collapse of Assyrian rule, The death of Ashurbanipal triggered bitter royal infighting, simultaneous uprisings in Babylonia, and the rapid rise of the Median kingdom, combining to dismantle centuries of imperial governance before the sack of Nineveh. After Ashurbanipal's passing in 627 BC succession, disputes split the Assyrian royal house into competing factions, crippling central administration and severing the empire's capacity to coordinate military deployment and resource allocation across distant provinces. Freed from tight imperial oversight, long oppressed Babylonian populations rose in armed rebellion to expel Assyrian garrisons and reclaim ancestral lands, cutting off Assyria's most critical grain supply and financial base. This revolt sparked a chain reaction as Syria, Phoenicia, and former Israeli territories all severed Assyrian suzerainty one after another. At the same time, the Median people from northern highlands built a formidable fighting force and marched south to exploit Assyria's domestic turmoil. Trapped between widespread domestic insurgency and foreign military incursions, the once invincible Assyrian professional army lost its logistical support and fighting morale amid repeated multi-front deployments. In 612 BC, allied Median and Babylonian troops laid siege to Nineveh and breached the city's defensive walls in short order. The imperial capital was subjected to full-scale destruction. Royal palaces, temple complexes, precious library archives, and monumental stone carvings were burned to ruins. The imperial family perished amid the slaughter, and surviving residents were either slain or enslaved, marking the definitive end of the Assyrian imperial regime. The sudden downfall of Assyria stemmed not from military inferiority or external overpower, but from a flawed governing system built entirely on intimidation and accumulated inter-ethnic animosity. Conquest secured land and temporary obedience through brute force, yet fear could never cultivate genuine loyalty or shared identity among conquered nations. Centuries of suppressed resentment exploded the moment imperial military control faltered, triggering a domino effect that erased a once dominant empire from historical maps. Reviewing the full historical timeline of Assyrian civilization, its military innovations pioneered ancient warfare tactics and preserved invaluable ancient written records via Ashurbanipal's library. Yet its state structure centered exclusively on violent territorial plunder and oppressive domination without sustainable domestic development frameworks. Assyrian history serves as humanity's earliest documented case study on the inevitable backlash of violent hegemony. Military might can seize territory rapidly, but no amount of intimidation is capable of winning popular allegiance or sustaining long-term imperial stability. Any hegemony constructed solely on bloodshed and terror is doomed to eventual collapse under the hatred it creates.